So welcome everyone to our next PowHERHour session. Very excited today. Clearly all of these are very relevant topics, but everyone loves to have, tips and tricks on how to, oh my gosh, what exactly, aren't we doing interviewing tips today? I'm sorry. I think we're doing that, right, Melissa?
More pre-interview.
Pre-interview. How to get ready for an interview. That's right.
Isn't it standing out from the candidate pool?
Yeah,
it is. Yes.
Thank you. I had the wrong screen up. I've got about 6 screens up. So thank you. And I appreciate the support. Just like that, it's so great to hear the support from this group, because obviously we had a big mishap on Monday and we thoroughly apologize for that mishap. And when I sent the note out to everyone, the responses back that I got were just like, mistakes happen. We totally get it. Thank you so much for doing this. So this community is amazing. We are here for you just as much as you are here for us. So thank you all for your grace and support as we, continue to manage through this. We just have such great content and we don't want anyone to miss out. So thank you all so much. I will be posting a survey at the end for you all to make comments on today's session, as well as sessions that you are looking to have, like future sessions as well. And be on the lookout for more information on how to RSVP for even more sessions, because we're adding like 3 or 4 more sessions in the month of April. So more to come on that. But I will.
Don't kill me. I have 3 more to add.
No, it's great.
I also wanted to introduce Melissa. She is amazing and I'm thrilled to have her here today. She is the executive director of Girl Up. And if you guys don't know Girl Up, you have to check it out. I am on the board and it is an amazing leadership development program for girls and a part of the United Nations. And Melissa is just doing some amazing, amazing things there and changing girls' lives. It's a by girl, for girl movement. So if you guys have any daughters, they should check it out. They can start their own clubs. They learn how to advocate for each other and for themselves. They build their confidence. They learn how to become leaders. They learn how to fundraise. There's so much that they learn from this program. So check it out. I know Melissa's not here for that today, but I wanted to put in a little sell for it. And thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us. I really am honored that you're here and doing this with us. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And one more sorry from me, because that was totally my fault. I was in the midst of boxes and put down my phone, and I never do that. And I was like, come up for air an hour later. Oh no, I totally missed it. So my fault, and glad to be here with you guys all today. And thank you for joining. And I am kicking it over to Melissa.
Well, thank you, Jen. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there to you all in the work from home life that it is. There is a window repairman walking around my house right now. So if you hear him or my dog, just like pre-apologies, but I know we all know how that goes. So a little miscommunication with my husband on scheduling, but got to get the window fixed. So it's all good. So I'm going to share my screen, and I put together a bit of a presentation for us for today. So I want to first just kind of introduce this topic. I was brainstorming of what I thought I could kind of bring to this conversation, and this idea of all of us coming together to help each other, to help our networks, to get women back to work, and what all of that entails. And I realized, in my career and my time as a leader and in the nonprofit industry specifically, but I have hired a lot of people, and I have looked at a lot of resumes and cover letters, and I tend to give out advice on this topic a lot, whether it's in my personal network or our Girl Up girls. So this is just a topic that I have real life experience. I'm not in HR. I'm not a recruiter. This is not something that I have like formal training in, but this is really what happens when I see a resume and I really think about, do I want to interview this person? Does this make it to the very small yes pile out of a very large maybe pile? And so I just want to walk through the things that I have learned over the years, the things that really stand out to me, some things that have actually worked for me personally, and the things that have really led to the people that I've actually hired. So I'm kind of going a little bit more informal with this, really based on my experience hiring people and a lot of lessons learned along that way, but also advice that I share with people. We are going to do, I have some time at the end for Q&A, but the chat is open. I will keep an eye on it. I'm getting like fairly decent at Zoom facilitation. So, if you do want to comment, want to ask a question as we go, please feel free to use the chat function. Again, I do have a little bit of time at the end. I don't even know if this will be an hour. It kind of depends on you guys, but we'll go ahead and jump in. So from my perspective, the hardest part of getting a job is getting an interview. I think that this is how I really wanted to anchor our time and this webinar is, how do you get to the interview? So this isn't even prepping for the interview, but it's actually all a lot the same from my perspective. Cutting through the big pile of applications is the hardest part. Once you have an interview, it's really, you have a lot more opportunity to showcase yourself, your personality, to connect with somebody directly. And whether that's an HR person or it is actually the hiring manager or a hiring team or future colleagues, but standing out from the candidate pool, from my perspective, really is the most important thing. So that's what we're gonna kind of focus on. So I have kind of boiled this down to 5 things that are really important to me when I am reviewing a cover letter or a resume. These are the things when I'm looking at hundreds of applications, how do I get down to the 10 to 20 people that I might talk to or that I might ask someone to screen for me? And it's cutthroat. Like when you're talking about that many volumes, like there's great people that get cut all the time. And there's just no other way to actually get down to a manageable size of candidates to interview for any given position. So the 5 key things for me as a hiring manager is that I want to share with you all that are sort of my tips, the advice that I give to the real people in my life. I helped my husband get a job a couple years ago as he transitioned out of law enforcement from 20 years. It was like, how do I do this? So this is like my real advice. Accuracy matters. You probably heard this before, but personalize everything. Be specific, use your network, and cold outreach does work. So we're going to go into each of these, and I'm going to share some real examples, some things that I've experienced and some things that I look for as a hiring manager. And again, feel free to chime in the chat as we go. So the first thing, accuracy. So I cannot tell you how many cover letters and applications I get that do not spell girl up correctly. They don't have it capitalized right. They don't have the spacing right. They don't, if they refer to United Nations Foundation, which is where we are housed, they're getting that wrong. My name has been misspelled. An old colleague who doesn't work here anymore is listed in the 2 line. Those are things that show a hiring manager you're not paying attention, right? The attention to detail, I can't imagine a job where somebody isn't looking for that quality. And those first materials, that's the first filter for me. If you can't do enough research to get the name of the company or the name of a person that you are sending this to, sometimes we don't always have that access, but usually you can do some research and try to figure it out. If you're going to include a name, make sure you get it right. Make sure you spell it right. And then, I actually really, if it's a job that you really want, have somebody look it over for you. I'll give you a personal example. When I got this job with Girl Up, almost 10 years ago now, it was my dream job. I mean, when I saw this posting, it was like my whole body lit on fire, every nerve ending. I think I just shook for like 3 days while I worked on this application. And I had like 10 people in my life review my cover letter and resume. I've never done that before. I've never even had anybody proofread a cover letter or resume before. But I wanted those extra set of eyes. I wanted to make sure that I was getting it as accurate as possible and that I was showcasing things about myself that maybe I hadn't thought of, right? Like I even asked my dad to proofread my resume. I was 30 years old and I was like, you've hired people, look at this. What do you think? I had never asked for that before. So, you know, I can't emphasize this enough that I've tried to kind of back off my like sticklerness on this, because I think it's one of those things that like not everybody is perfect all the time, but there's some things that you really do want to make sure you have accuracy, and that really matters. So get a second eye, check, double check, make sure that you are putting your best quality forward. Again, that's the fastest and easiest way that I put somebody into the no pile. I might not even look at their resume because the cover letter had an inaccuracy that was really just too simple and too easy to miss. I'm sure you've all heard this before, but I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to personalize every single aspect of your application submission. I mean, actually resumes and cover letters. So no templates, no blanket letters. If you can do everything possible to not say to whom it may concern, at least put hiring manager of Girl Up if you can't figure out the right name. And I'm just using my organization because it's the best example for me, but like hiring manager at Berlin Cameron, you know, use something to say that I have written this letter to you and that I didn't just send you the PDF I had saved on my desktop, because it's a big flag. And from my perspective as a hiring manager, if you aren't personalizing this letter to tell me why this job and why you don't want it that much. If you haven't taken the time to customize and personalize your cover letter specifically, it's another filter. It's an easy filter for me. Again, if I'm looking at 300 applications and in a job market like we're in right now, you really should assume that you are up against a big stack of these applications. You don't want to be in the quick filter to the no pile. Blanket letters that don't say the name of the position, the name of the organization, or reference a specific person who you are writing this letter to, that's another easy filter. It's a no filter. And I think the biggest thing about personalization is it should almost be a new letter written from scratch with each new job. You can absolutely reuse your language, reuse your bullets, reuse it, but it should be responding to the specific job posting. And that means you're going to order things differently. That means you might leave something out that you've included on a previous letter or vice versa. From my perspective on these cover letters is don't save this information for an interview. What if you never get to the interview? How are you showing who you are, what you bring that is relevant to this, your skills, your experience, your passion? You want to actually match that to the posting. And again, if I'm looking at 5 resumes and it's very similar, right? The numbers of years, the type of, prior work experience, if those resumes are real similar, who gets to the yes pile and who gets an interview, it's going to be based on the cover letter. So that's the thing that allows me as a hiring manager to start to get to know you and to get to know how you might fit with my team and with my organization. So I think the other piece of this is really you should also be personalizing your resume. I didn't do this. I'm going to go ahead and go on record and be honest with y'all. 10 years ago, when I was applying for jobs and looking for new things and found Girl Up, I was using a pretty standard resume. I might tweak a word here or there, but I wasn't doing a lot of customization with your resumes. I think now, in the market that we're in, and especially as I have grown in my career, depending on where you are in your career, if you're more junior level, it might be a little bit more of a standard resume. But as you gain experience, you really should be looking at what are those bullets under each of your jobs that you're highlighting. What is that executive summary, if you use it, where you're really pulling keywords, right? So make sure that you're also thinking about, does this version of my resume match the posting as closely as I can? The cover letter is a must. The resume is a really good idea. I know when you're doing applications, it's a numbers game. You are trying to apply to the most jobs possible most of the time, but you have to take that step or else it reads that, oh, I just applied to this as part of a numbers game and I don't really care if I get this job or not. So really taking that extra time. Again, this is like common advice, but I can't tell you how applicable it is in real life when you are really trying to go from hundreds down to tens or 20s for who you're going to talk to and make it to the next round. My next tip is be specific. Again, this is not revolutionary advice that I'm giving you. This is not like, oh my gosh, there's a brand new tip. This is really just, these are the things that make applications go to the yes pile for me. When I was talking about resumes and even some of the key bullets or key things you want to highlight in your cover letter, think about keyword searches. So when I have a pool of 300, 400, 500, or I ask my HR team to help me do those screens, I may never even see half of those. We may do a keyword search that eliminates half of the pool right away. If I have, in my qualifications, in the things that I'm looking for, or in the job responsibilities, there's going to be some keywords that I'm specifically looking for that kind of a skill or that kind of experience. So when you are crafting your resume, when you are figuring out what are the bullets that you're going to put under each of your, work experiences, as well as when you are writing your cover letter, keep referring back to that job posting. Try to use the language and the vernacular that is in the posting. Try to match it as closely as possible, because more than likely, if someone has put those words in a job posting, those are going to be the keywords they search for. You won't know which ones. It's kind of a crapshoot, but use the words and the language as much as you can. Key word searches, again, that means half of these I may never even see. It could be the best cover letter, hilarious, funny. I know you. I want to get to know you. I just almost feel like I had an interview with you on a piece of paper. I can't wait to talk to you. What if I never read your cover letter? So all of this is about how do you just kind of keep pushing yourself up to increase your chances of being seen. That's the key to all of this. Keyword searches are a big part of that. So my advice to you again is just really, as you're customizing your application for each job posting, look at the words that they're using in those qualifications and try to use the same words. Like literally, if I was, applying for a job as a marketing assistant, writing, communication, creativity, if that's in the job posting, I better use those words. I better be showing, have I worked on a website? Have I done collateral? What are those keywords that they're asking that you have experience in, and how can you weave those words in? So being specific is really important. Again, I think the other piece of this that I'm about to share shouldn't be a surprise, probably things that you've heard, but get really specific about what you accomplished in your previous roles. This is where broad strokes, did X, did Y, you want to be really, really specific. So if I was going to update my resume for my next executive level nonprofit job, I would say raised $27 million over the 10 years, expanded globally into United Kingdom, Mexico, Zambia, India, et cetera, right? Like how specific can you be so that I'm not guessing of like, did you really do it? Were you part of the team that did it? Were you peripheral to it? Like how much experience have you actually had doing this thing that is applicable to this thing that you want to do with me? So, and also I think one of the things that I really love in a cover letter is like, why are those things, why are you proud of those things? Why were those significant accomplishments to you personally, but also how did that further the organization? I want to read your letter, look at your resume and be like, I want them to do that for me. I want her to come here and do what she did in X way, but I see that she's done something similar. So I feel good about that. Again, I'm going to say this about 1,000 times over the next few minutes that we are together, but the goal is to get to the interview. Don't save your best material for the interview, or you may not get to tell anyone. Put it in your application. Repeat it when you get to the interview. Trust me, they won't remember, right? They've just screened hundreds of applicants. So don't save that for the interview. Put it in your application. The next piece of this, and I think this is actually truly the most important piece. And this is the piece that I talk to our Girl Up alumni about all the time. Don't be shy about using your network. Use your network. Make up a network. Go ripple out of your network. But this is the number one most important thing. Again, I'm sure you all know this, but this is a reinforcement and a reminder. Remember that pile of 300 applications that I'm trying to sift through? If anybody contacts me about a person who might be in that pile, guess what? I'm going to read it. I may not know them. I may be peripherally connected to them. If it's a close colleague and it's in my inbox and my email, I'm absolutely reading the email. If I get a LinkedIn message from somebody who's a contact and they're sending me a note about someone they know, somebody took 5 minutes out of their day to write me a note. That's a good enough. That's good enough for me to put eyes on your application. So use your network. And what I tell entry-level people a lot of times is you may not have that big of a professional network, but just recently I was hiring for both an entry-level position and a senior level position. And for both of those candidates, I got notes from UN Foundation colleagues who went to their alma maters. They said, I don't know this person, but she tracked me down. We went to the same school. I looked at her application, looks really interesting. I'm passing it along. Guess what? I opened the attachment. Getting eyes on your application is the first step to getting to the interview. If you are sitting in that pile and you get caught up in one of those screens, one of those like accuracy screens or keyword screens, I may never see your application. So literally find any way to anybody at that company. I'll give you a personal example. This is kind of taking it to the extreme, but I will tell you that's how I got to Girl Up. And it was a crazy way of getting here. So I actually used my current boss at my old job to be my referral for this role. That's how much I wanted this job. Luckily, my company knew that I was looking, that I was trying to kind of figure out what was the next thing. They were really supportive, but I reached out to my current boss and said, you hold the relationship with the UN Foundation. This position is posted. I think I'm qualified. I'm super excited and passionate about this. Would you please send my resume? They did. It got seen. It got opened by the hiring manager. They were able to send my application directly to the hiring manager. I could have gotten lost in that pool so easily. And it was a risk. It was a calculated risk because there was some openness about it. But I'm just saying, had that not happened, I would not have potentially stood out from that pool. And I may not have been the lead candidate all the way through the hiring process or gotten my foot in the door 10 years ago to be leading this organization today. So again, use your network. And I will say, I talk to a lot of young women about this who are like, oh, Melissa, we don't want to bother you. I'm like, I know you. I probably know people in the industry that you're trying to find a job in. I can vouch for you. It's a personal referral. Don't ever not ask me to send an email for you. Like, that is one of the easiest things I can do. And it is one of the ways that I can use my position, my privilege, and my platform to help you in your goals. So I also say, as women, we have to not be shy about asking for this, about asking for those notes, and really, really tap into this. So, you know, I see a comment in the chat about LinkedIn, and it is, I can't even imagine what we all did before LinkedIn, right? We probably just had to cross our fingers and hope that we had a good cover letter and that somebody looked at it. But networking and your network is really the most important. And again, you almost don't even have to know the person. If, like I said, I've gotten pings on LinkedIn from somebody in my network that maybe I hadn't even met personally, and they were sending me a referral for someone that was applying. But again, that person took time out of their busy schedule to look me up and send me a note. And honestly, that's enough, because how else am I going to get through hundreds and hundreds of resumes and applications? For me, it's always a good mark. And if it's someone that I know, that I trust, that I've worked with, they're going to get a really close consideration, because you all know, I mean, I'm sure many of you know, you You hire someone based on a couple of conversations. If you know someone who's worked with them, that's a much safer bet and a safer hire because you know what to expect. And I think for a lot of hiring managers, those referrals go a really, really long way. The last piece on this, my sort of fifth tip here, is cold outreach also does work. It's harder. It has to be really, really, really good, but it does work. So again, we all know this is a numbers game. Send it out. Even if you don't know anybody, you can't find the right place, you can't find a person, you can't get connected, you can't figure out who the hiring manager is, apply anyway. I will tell you that I have received LinkedIn messages cold direct to me that were so well crafted that they literally got an interview because of how well crafted the cold LinkedIn message was. This has happened to me more than once. So again, it's got to be really good. You don't ask for anything, just highlight that you've applied, send a note. I read my messages. I don't know, maybe when you're bigger and more in demand than me, if you get that many messages on LinkedIn, maybe you don't. I do. And I've actually had two people make it into a first interview round and beat out other people because I was so impressed by the cold message that they sent me on LinkedIn. Again, it has to be personal, has to be short and sweet, and it has to be exceptional for me to say, okay, this is worth looking at. This is worth considering. Again, anything you can do to ensure that somebody is actually laying eyes on your application is the most important thing. The other thing is, I've hired plenty of people out of the pool. So I say all of this, and you can get hired without a referral. You can get hired without doing cold outreach on LinkedIn. If you have an exceptional application, it should stand out. You should make it through those screens. You should make it through the keyword screens. Someone should look at your resume and say, this is fantastic. This matches everything I'm looking for. Or someone should be able to read your cover letter and be like, wow, this is really great. I really kind of getting who this person is. I can see what they might be able to bring to the team and to this position. I will tell you, just this past year, and my colleagues and I still talk about it, we hired a person in March, literally right before COVID, right before we went remote. And the role was actually a digital fundraising manager. And so a big part of her job was writing emails with a fundraising ask. It was the best cover letter I have ever read or received in my 20 years professionally. And I really believe that's how she got the job. Like, nobody could match her throughout the interview process or the hiring process, because the bar that she had set for herself with her cover letter was so good that she was just so far out in the lead through the whole thing. Nobody knew her. There was no referral. She made it, she got eyes on it, and it was so good that that's how she got the job. Of course, her interview backed it up. Of course, her experience and her examples, but she was already kind of like the front runner as a candidate just based on that cover letter. So again, that goes all the way back to the accuracy, the personalization, the specifics, and really allowing us to see you do that work. Obviously, this is a woman who is a gifted writer. This is what she's doing for us as an organization now. But it absolutely can happen. I mean, we've hired a lot of people just from the applicant pool. It's just harder to make it through those initial screens. And so really these suggestions and these tips allow us to make sure that we're getting eyes on your materials. This is just my perspectives. You probably heard advice otherwise, and maybe somebody else would answer this differently. I'd actually be really curious, but I personally, when I have a job posted and it's a live position that we're accepting applications for, I'm not going to do an informational interview. I'm not going to do an informal or virtual coffee. I'm going to go through the hiring process. That's just a personal preference. Like, I actually want to go through these screens. So when I say to do cold outreach or those LinkedIn messages that I've received, it was really basically like, hey, I applied for this position, blah, 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 blah. Here's my story. Here's why. Here's my pitch to kind of get your eyes on my name and my application. I really look forward to hearing from you through the process. That's enough for me. I get messages all the time about asking for that informational interview for a position that's posted. A lot of times I'm not even the hiring manager, it's someone else on my team. It's kind of inappropriate for me to do an informal or informational interview while we're actively in a hiring process, but I also feel like it's going outside the process. And so I don't do those. If it's just more about, hey, we have a connection, I'd love to learn about your role, how you got here. One, you need to compel me to give you my time, but also if that's happening outside of a job posting, there's a little bit less pressure there. I can just kind of have a conversation, give advice, talk through that. That's more of a measure of like, how busy am I right now and how generous with my time can I be? Typically I save that for people I know or people I know who know other people, but just to share that, I think I get those a lot while I have active postings, and they don't really do anything to help. It doesn't necessarily hurt, but I'm not going to go outside of the process. And again, I don't know if that's universal, and I would imagine someone else might give you other advice. But again, just real talk from how I approach this and how I hire people. That tactic doesn't really kind of work for me because I don't like to do things outside of the open process. I have more control over it that way. So kind of key takeaways of these 5 kind of major tips and tricks. And then I have some advice and a little bit of like an exercise that you can do to really try to hone in on what to pull kind of into that cover letter specifically, but into your application overall. And then we can see if there's any Q&A. So kind of boiling it down, brag, boast, back it up, right? Like, celebrate your accomplishments, back it up with specific examples, but pitch, give the sales, give the pitch. You may not get in front of them to do that in person. You have to do it with your application. Don't save it for the interview. You got to get to the interview. The goal with the written application is to get to the interview. Double and triple check for accuracy. Again, it's the fastest way to the no pile. If you're talking about jobs that are getting lots and lots and lots of applications, don't be shy with your network. This is how it works. We've all benefited from it. We've all been asked for it. We've all asked others. Ask. Even if there isn't like the strongest and most direct connection, try to make a connection wherever you can. And then my last piece of advice that wasn't really part of the last 5 pieces, but is just a personal plea and pitch to you all is you do not need to be 100% qualified. You don't even need to be 80% qualified. If you feel like you can cover about half of the qualifications, like confidently, apply, because you don't know which half of those qualifications are the most important to that specific hiring manager. There's always room for growth. There's always something that's the most important qualification in that list of qualifications and other things that are wish lists. Nobody writes a job description based on, oh, this is really, really required and this we just love to have. Like, you just don't see it that way. So you're going to guess. And if you're looking to be 100%, you're missing out. I think, again, we hear this stat a lot of, men will apply for jobs that they're like 20% qualified for, and women wait until they're 100% qualified. But I would reframe that of like, smart women apply for jobs that they're at least 50% qualified for, because we've all, if you've been through a promotion cycle, you're growing into a role. When I got my job with Girl Up, I had a lot of applicable skills, but I hadn't worked in the space. So I knew I could do the internal management, the staff management, the grassroots experience, but I hadn't done advocacy. I hadn't worked in international development, and I hadn't worked with the UN, but I could run the internal team, and I had the skills and the very specific qualifications. So I applied. It was a stretch. I'll be honest. It was a lateral move for me skills-wise, but it was a stretch application. Turns out, the things that I brought confidently into the role was exactly what they were hiring for. The other things were wish list items, things that I could learn on the job, things that I could build and grow my experience in the role. But I had to be able to run the team and the internal processes, because that was something that the team didn't have and needed. Had I not applied because I didn't have those other qualifications, I wouldn't be sitting here literally giving you all these thoughts from my head. if I would have actually held back and not applied for a position that I didn't think that I was 100% qualified for. So again, just to reiterate that, if you can check a couple of those bullets, apply, because you never know which bullets are the most important. So I'm just gonna leave you with some questions, some things to think through as you are trying to think about, okay, how do I personalize this cover letter? How do I get out the words that I would normally share in an interview? How can I bring some of that into my application? Melissa said, don't save it for the interview. So how do I do that? So a couple questions. Think of your last performance review. We all have them, hopefully, right? We all have them pretty regularly. Hopefully your last performance review wasn't 10 years ago. If so, call a good friend and ask them, ask them these questions. But what did your last manager highlight as your strengths? Okay, so you've heard it from a professional setting, a person. Write it down. Make sure that you're capturing that when you talk about who you are, why this job. This is my favorite interview question, period. I just don't know why, but I just love this question. And I ask it to literally everybody that I interview. But if somebody put this in a cover letter to me, it would really stand out. And I think, again, it's not about just, I like this question, but it's about your character. It's about what you can be depended on for, what you can be counted on for. What is one word that describes you at work? And the best word, think of just the one word. Mine is persistence. I am persistent. So no doesn't really go very far. I will keep pushing. I will put something out into the world and I will persist until it happens. It might take a couple years, it might take a couple months, I don't know. But my persistence has been my superpower at work, to getting things done, to moving my own career forward, to making my organization successful. That's my word. If I was going to write a cover letter tomorrow, you better believe I would be talking about my persistence, because it's also been reinforced by other people who I trust. And I also carry it as a badge of pride. So think about, what is that one word and how can you incorporate that into your application? I love that tenacity. That's good. All good. All of these words are important. I've heard honesty. I've heard hard work. All of those things are important, but just really think, what is your one word? If you only get to pick one, what is it? And how can you incorporate that into your cover letter, into your application? And then the other piece, again, these questions sound like interview questions, and they really are. But my advice to you is, how can you portray these in your application so you can get to the interview? What parts of your work have you loved the most, have fulfilled you, have brought you joy? It is very likely that you are good at or can be counted on for these types of responsibilities. If I love working with people, I'm probably pretty good at working with people. If I love learning and growing, I might be pretty good at getting feedback, right? If I love accomplishing big goals, I might be visionary, right? So what are the things about my day-to-day work that bring me satisfaction, that bring me happiness? Because if I'm happy doing them, I'm probably good at them. That's another way you can kind of do some soul searching and think of, what are the types of skills and responsibilities and aspects of my work that I want to showcase to a potential employer. And then, this is something to think about. If it works in your cover letter, include it. If it works in your executive summary on your resume, include it. It's also just a really good, personal advice to assess if this is the right job for you to be applying for. But what are your goals? How does this job fit into your career goals? What about this company and this job excites you? That question should absolutely be answered in your cover letter. But if you can convey that excitement and personal connection in your application, the person reading your application will get excited about what you could bring to the team, to the organization, to the role. And then, really thinking about, we talked about accomplishments earlier. What is your proudest accomplishment professionally? And how does that relate to the job at hand, so the job that you are trying to get? And is that accomplishment highlighted appropriately in both your resume and your cover letter? Again, these are the places where we can brag and boast because we actually accomplished it. We can toot our own horns and celebrate that, but in a way that relates directly to the posting that's going to come across really helpful to a hiring manager who, again, is sifting through volume and really needs these nuggets of things to stand out to get a sense of who you are from your written materials. So those are my kind of questions to think through as you're crafting these application materials, really with this idea of not saving it for the interview, standing out from hundreds potentially, who knows, maybe thousands, depending on what kind of a company and role you're applying for. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to actually, so that I can see better, I'm going to stop sharing and just bring us all back to the gallery mode here. But I want to also see, we got vulnerability over here. So any other thoughts, questions, Q&A, you can chat it in the chat box, or you can just come off of mute and ask a question. I see something from Gabby, whose words are entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I think that's great. Like, then relate entrepreneurial spirit to some of the job responsibilities that you see in the post, right? So how would being proactive and entrepreneurial be an asset? Tie it to a specific job requirement. And I think that that's the way I would connect it, because entrepreneurial spirit could be a little bit vague. Those are beautiful words. And like, I love that. And as a hiring manager, I love that, because I feel like I won't have to be on top of you all the time, because you're gonna have that proactivity. But if you can make that even more specific and connect it to a specific aspect of the role, then you've just connected the dots for me, and I don't have to take the time to go through and connect those dots myself. So that would be my advice there. But I love a good entrepreneur, because I know that, like, I'm not gonna have to ride them to get their work done, right? And that's a good quality. Any other, or also, like, you are all professionals too, any advice that you would share, any ways that you've seen this actually come through, for real. Would love to just, let me know what you think. And if there's no Q&As, you guys can have part of your lunchtime or morning time or daytime back too.
Hi.
Hi.
Marela here. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this and kind of like guiding us into the good path of making a good impression on the interviews. Here's my question. I have come to to apply to a company, let's say, and that company has many jobs posted, and I am applying to one job, but I feel that I am fit to like 5 other ones that they have posted. Do you apply for the 5 jobs? What, how is it? I mean, obviously I have done many of the stuff that you mentioned in there, but it's kind of like that hard of like finding all of the hiring managers for each one of the positions and trying to contact almost the entire company for your resume to get reviewed. What have you, your thoughts on that?
So from my personal experience, I would only see your application for the role that I am specifically hiring. And we have multiple people in our HR department who also divide up positions. So my advice is you have to apply for all of them, because I would want to make sure my bases are covered, that there was no chance that somebody would see me for one position, but not the other. And then I would back that up and see if you can't figure out a way to get to the HR or the recruiting department and let them know that you've applied for multiple positions and that you've submitted individual applications that sort of share why each of those positions are you think you would be qualified for. I think it's helpful to have that reference. For a larger organization like mine, if all the roles were girl up, again, let's just use my job as there's 300 people that work at the UN Foundation. There could be positions all over the UN Foundation, but if there were like 3 roles posted for girl up and you were going to apply for all 3 and girl up, there's a higher chance I would probably see it, but I'm not necessarily going to make the connection that you're interested in all 3. So I think my advice would be apply for a role. If you think you're qualified and you're interested, cover your bases. Don't leave that to chance, because what happens when you have these high numbers of applications is they're just looking at that bucket and may not be making the connection of like, oh, this is a really great resume. I wonder if they would be a better fit for this role. They might, but maybe is like, I wouldn't base it on maybe. And it's okay. Like I wouldn't knock somebody for sending me 5 applications. As long as they personalize the cover letter for each of the roles, it's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. Again,
That's
from my
everything,
personal
the
experience.
cover letter. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question in the chat about how should you handle it when salary is a required field in the application system. You can't move forward unless you put the number in there. I never know whether to put the salary I want or the salary I will actually take. This is a loaded question, and thank you for the question, Nicole. One of the things that we have started to do at UN Foundation is we have stopped asking for your current salary because we understand sort of like pay equity, that's a big challenge, but we do ask for your requested salary. If you can put in a range, go that route. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it literally just asks you for a number. My advice would be to find a middle ground that is real. So if you want, I'm just going to throw out round numbers. If you want 100,000, but you would do it for 80, I would think about putting in 90 or 100, because I always look at a range. When I'm looking at salary bands, I'll say, okay, my range internally is 90 to 100. So why don't we look at 85 to 110? And that's the band that I'm going to actually filter, so that I know that I'm not wasting my time having a conversation with someone, make them an offer, and they're like, that's not high enough. And then I'm also not sort of pricing myself over or under the experience level that I'm looking for. It's really that's a hard one to navigate correctly, because you want to position yourself well for what you want, but you don't want to filter yourself out if you would really be okay with less. If you wouldn't be okay with less, don't put less. Like if you're like, I'm not taking another job unless it's $100,000 plus, then put $100,000 in. Like, don't waste your own time. It's a lot of work to customize resumes and cover letters and do that for every job. But if you really would be okay, then I would find a middle ground that allows you some room to negotiate. $10,000 difference, there's probably some room to negotiate there, but it doesn't cut you out or filter you out of the screening process, because that's really what that field is used for, is screening. When you're talking about the hundreds and you're trying to get down to a more manageable number of even whose cover letter do you get to read, it's really a screening question. So think of how you want to answer that based on how you actually want to be screened for it, especially if they're not posting the range with the position. It's a guessing game for you too. But I would say, just be honest. And if you have more flexibility, then find a good middle ground. Francine.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is so much good stuff here. To follow up on someone's earlier question regarding, applying for multiple roles at one company, I'm finding myself pretty passionate about a couple places that I'd really love to get in at. And I'm just a little bit concerned about looking like I'm not dedicated to any one role. And I'm afraid that might be perceived if I'm applying to multiple roles to just kind of seem like all over the place, right? And I heard what you said about, making sure that cover letter is really honed in and making sure that you're really aligned with what they're looking for. But I just feel like if they had all of my resumes in front of them, right, and all these cover letters, and I sound so dedicated to each, where's my head really at, right? And so how can I communicate that? I just really want to be a part of your mission, but,
Yeah. So two pieces of advice here. One is make sure that your cover letter starts with why that organization, and that's consistent across all of your applications. If the headline is, I want to work for this organization, I think I'm qualified for this role in this way, and I think that I could meet the qualifications of this role in this way and further your organization. If that starts to be where you're customizing, you're really painting a picture. But I would say lead with the org. If the org is the thing the company is the thing that's leading you, right? That will give you some consistency. And also if I'm a HR recruiter and I see your name keep coming up, but you're just hitting me with like, this is the company that I want to be at, and I feel like I could fill a couple of different places, I'm going to see that if you approach your application that way. The other piece is, in that setting, if it was me, I would reach out to somebody who works there cold or through some other connection and say, hey, I just applied to these 3 positions. I'm super excited about this company and I really would love to work here. And I believe I'm qualified for like different reasons for different roles, but call it out. I think you're actually going to get the best chance of someone looking across all of your materials and then maybe assessing where they see the greatest fit. Because remember, in that list of qualifications, some are must have and some are wish list. So they're going to be able to look at those qualification lists and be like, well, she's got a must have on this one. Let's start there. Yeah. But I would actually go the extra step to just send a general note, whether it's on if you can find someone's email or LinkedIn or whatever, and just say, hey, I've applied for multiple roles. Here's why. Here's what it is about your company that's really speaking to me. And here's why I think I'm qualified for all 3 of these. I just want you to know what I'm doing, right? And like, you can actually even just say that. Yeah. I would respond really positively to that. And then again, if your application materials are on point and back it up for each of those, then I have the opportunity to say, which one do I think she has the best fit for, and let's proceed down that conversation.
Would you have like one document where you're connecting all the dots besides that sort of informal cold reach out?
You could. I think it's almost like the overview cover letter that you end up sending in an email body or in a LinkedIn body, right? It's almost like the same organizational why. It is at the top, and then like, with this role I could do this, with this role I could do this, with this role I could do this, like, here's me and here's why you want me. That probably is your general outreach, but I would still do all the different applications so that you're in the system, because again, if somebody screens you out before the person you sent that note to reads that note, I just wouldn't risk it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? I know we're getting to the end of time. All right. I'll turn it back over to Jen and Julie.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I thought that was really great. Great advice, and hope you all enjoyed it. Julie, do you have a closeout on next session?
Next session is on Monday, and it is a workshop on Networking 101. So we are all, I'm sure, expert networkers, and we're learning how to network in these times. So definitely join us on Monday. And next Wednesday is 10 tips how to define, refine, and design your time. I love that title. So all of those you can RSVP on the website. And then of course, we'll be posting individual invites as well on the Connect for Women and She Covery LinkedIn pages.
And check out Girl Up. Plug. All right. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thanks, guys. Bye. Thank you, Melissa.